Hello, everyone. Thank you for choosing to share your time with me today. I'm Rania Benema, a Research Associate at Flood & Partners, and I'd like to help us understand how we can achieve better representation of marginalised groups. So, there we go. In terms of the agenda, we'll be discussing what we mean by marginalised groups and why it's important to represent them. What might marginalised groups face in terms of limitations in access to opportunities and access to participation in research. Then we'll talk about how we can do better. And finally, I'll leave you with 3 key takeaways and a bunch of tools and resources that you can dig your teeth into after. So we don't have long together, so I'll keep it quite high level, but hopefully this is a great place to start. So what do we mean by marginalised groups? So marginalised groups are social groups within a society that experience systematic discrimination, exclusion, or disadvantaged based on various characteristics such as ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, socioeconomic status, and religion. Why is it important to represent marginalised groups? Well, firstly, and personally, I think it's the most important, it's morally the right thing to do. And also it's been well documented now that businesses make much better decisions when they have diverse workforces and diverse leadership. As researchers, we seek to paint a pretty accurate picture of what's going on in the world, and we can't really do that if we leave out a significant proportion of our peers. The latest MRS ED&I report showed that only 20% think that the industry is inclusive for all, which shows that there's a lot of work to be done. So what are some of the drivers behind marginalisation? This can include discrimination, a lack of representation, microaggressions, which can sort of be subtle, often unintentional behaviours or comments that make somebody feel unwelcome and undervalued. Tokenism, so that's kind of when superficially or symbolically there's an effort to have an underrepresented person in the room, but actually their opinions aren't valued. Or unequal opportunities, so unequal access to opportunities could stem from socioeconomic factors. These drivers can be conscious or unconscious. They can be covert and overt, which kind of shows that some of them can be difficult to spot, and it's going to take time to build that awareness so that we can fix the problem. So what are unconscious biases and what can they look like? So I'm going to take you through some examples of unconscious biases that we might experience kind of day to day. So one of them is confirmation bias. This bias involves seeking out information that confirms or confirms our existing beliefs and assumptions while ignoring or dismissing evidence that contradicts them. An example of this could be that Margot works super late and starts super early, but actually she's not been really productive, and her manager might have assumptions that if you work super late, it means that you're working really hard, versus Yusuf, who always clocks off on time, but actually produces really high quality work. Another example of unconscious bias is affinity bias. So that's kind of when you tend to favour individuals who have similar interests or backgrounds or experiences to you. So that might mean that Emmanuel gets chosen to be a part of a really important project coming up because the project lead aligns with him on their shared university experience. And another one that I want to talk about is stereotype threat. So stereotype threat occurs when individuals feel anxious or concerned about confirming negative stereotypes associated with their identity group, which can lead to underperforming in situations where their identity is salient. So that might mean that Emily is invited to present to a really important client, but she's aware of that stereotype that women are not as competent when it comes to technical abilities. So that leads to her having a lot of anxiety and feel a lot of pressure to perform well, which in turn impacts her confidence and then her performance. This is something that in my journey through this research, I've identified as something that I need to work on, and I think building that awareness and having that vocabulary means that I can reflect on that in my personal circumstances. So are marginalised groups represented in our research? Historically, in the industry standard for nationally representative UK adult sample, certainly not. So age, gender, region, and sometimes social grade have been considered, but what's been left out is ethnic minority, sexual orientation, and disability. That in total overlooks about 30% of the population and fails to tap into their unique views and experiences. So how can we do better? We can make sure our research is nationally representative when appropriate, and inclusivity is considered from design right through to reporting and analysis. The MRS Representation in Research Steering Committee continues to put together and update FAQs, best practice guides on asking questions around protected characteristics, as well as many other resources. And what's more, their commercial benefit study proved within the context of the UK that there is genuinely no barrier to including ethnicity, disability, and sexual orientation in that methodologies within the context of online UK research. I'll share some references at the end of this talk so that you can kind of explore their research findings a little bit further. Secondly, I encourage you all to consider signing the MRS Inclusion Pledge to solidify your commitment to driving the industry forward. The MRS has put together pledges for both independent consultants as well as companies, and the pledge strives for pay equity by working to ensure staff representation reflects the diversity of the business location. This includes ending unpaid internships, considering apprenticeships, and supporting outreach programs to improve recruitment and diversity. Leadership representation by aiming to meet government targets for representation of women and ethnic minorities in the boardroom. Diversity representation, I've swapped them around. Diversity representation in staff in the workforce, and then diversity representation in leadership too. Inclusive research design, so by designing and conducting inclusive research projects with transparent communication around sampling practices, especially when claiming that rep. And finally, an inclusive work environment by creating safe and welcoming spaces for people that fosters accessibility and supports mental health support and a proactive, inclusive culture. Finally, for this section, I'll be giving the fantastic purpose groups and networks at the MRS and beyond their flowers, albeit metaphorically. So the MRS Unlimited, MRS Pride, MRS Social Inclusion Group, WIRE and CORE, they're all doing absolutely fantastic work to break down the barriers and make sure that we are stepping forward in the right direction. So they have put together resources including educational network events, webinars, mentorship schemes, reports and blogs, and have mailing lists and LinkedIn communities that we can all kind of get involved in. So in terms of if you take anything away from the last 10 to 15 minutes, let it be these three things. I challenge you to go on a journey of self-reflection. Every single one of us has got unconscious biases, and I encourage you to reflect on yours so that you can make a journey towards improving them. Secondly, I challenge you to becoming an ally. Join one, if not all, of the amazing purpose groups and networks. I'll be sharing a link at the end of this talk. There's room for all of us to be a part of these networks as allies and people that belong to those identity groups. And finally, I challenge you to signing the MRS Inclusion Pledge. There's a wealth of resources put together by some very clever people to help you steer you and your business in the right direction. So overall, these commitments aim to create an inclusive environment within the sector that reflects and serves the diversity of our society. So just at the end, don't worry about taking photos of these because this presentation will be available afterwards, but I've just put together some resources to help you all start on this journey. So I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you. Have we got time for questions?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, is there any questions, please, for Anya? Yeah, they're in the middle.
Thank you. I thought that was a really great presentation, and it's such an important topic. Obviously, in our sector, we have a really high number of independent researchers, and I just wondered if you had any advice for those independent practitioners, what kind of steps they can take on this journey. It might be slightly different for them.
Yeah, sure. So some of the pledges are similar to that of companies in terms of fostering outreach programs that encourage diversity and encouraging diversity amongst peers and colleagues. But the independent researchers have got more of a focus to make sure that the partners that they're working with are sort of being mindful of inclusivity, whether that's through pay parity or through kind of making sure that they've got diverse teams both at the leadership level and amongst the workforce. But that's put together by the ICJ, which I've shared resources for if you want to have a look at it afterwards. And it's just important to say that actually also as companies, we should be striving to make sure that the partners and suppliers that we work with are being inclusive as well.
Thank you. Any more? More questions? Going? Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for that, Rania. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Rania again.